emotion. So a lot of the terms, a lot of the key terms in the course are going to begin with the word emotion. We got to define some terms right off the bat. We're going to talk about emotion, emotional arousal, and I'll add to this list as we go along. Emotional expression, emotional behavior, we've got a bunch of emotion terms. Emotional contagion, and emotional intelligence. That'll get us started. That'll get us going. That'll get us started.
Actually,
So
when you're recording, is there any way that you can zoom in on the board? Because like when you go back and watch the video, you can't see. Whoop, sorry.
Caught it.
Stop my heart.
You can't see anything that's written.
Life's too short for your heart to get stopped, boss.
Anything that's written on the board.
Okay, I can try to.
Okay.
Just the thing is, the farther that you zoom it in, it gets like kind of grainy and weird looking. But we'll try that. That would be fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's define these terms. This will help you as you're going through the chapter and you're working on the study guide and getting your notes together. If you know the definition of these terms, and right there's one of the rows in the matching, it looks like. Emotion, the term emotion, describes the feelings that we experience. Common term, common word, we use it all the time. Emotion describes the feelings that we experience. The feelings we experience, that's emotion. Common word, use it all the time. Now, emotional arousal is very, very important. Emotional arousal follows a specific event, it's called. Follows an event. Something specific happens. And the book keeps referring to an event. So as something specific happens that piques your emotions or heightens your emotions. Piques or heightens your emotion. Something specific happens that makes you very frightened, or very surprised, or very happy, or very sad. We're not talking about just run-of-the-mill everyday emotions with emotional arousal. Something has heightened those emotions. Something has piqued those emotions. And we call that something an event. Something happens. Yes, you get a phone call, boom, and you experience emotional arousal. The emotions are heightened. Someone gives you a gift that you weren't expecting. So you walk in and you see somebody that you weren't expecting to be there. You haven't seen them for a while. They surprised you. That's emotional arousal. Something unexpected happens. An event occurs, and your emotions are heightened. Your emotions are piqued. We could say heightened emotions. That's emotional arousal. Now, both emotional expression and emotional behavior are responses to emotional arousal. Emotional expression and emotional behavior are responses to emotional arousal. They're reactions to emotional arousal. So an event occurs and your emotions are piqued. You respond with emotional expression and or emotional behavior. They're both reactions to emotional arousal. Now, there's subtle differences between the two, and you need to know these differences and be able to tell the two apart when you take the test. The subtle differences between emotional expression and emotional behavior. Emotional expression, you're in control. It's how you choose to communicate emotion. How you choose to communicate emotion. Emotional expression is a conscious reaction to the emotional arousal. You are in control. You're doing this on purpose. You want the person to know that you're very excited, that you're very happy, or that you're very angry at them. So you do this. You communicate the emotion this way. It can be any number of things. It can be laughing so they see you. You can slam your fist. You can kick the garbage can. If you are in control, and it's a conscious reaction, you're in control of it, you're doing it on purpose, that's emotional expression. Now, emotional behavior is subconscious. It just happens. It's a subconscious reaction. You don't plan on it. You didn't do it on purpose. And it could be a physiological response. It could be a physiological response. It could be very, very subtle, like your hand shaking when the instructor calls on you to stand up in front of the class and give a presentation unexpectedly, and your hands start shaking. That'd be emotional behavior. You didn't plan that. You didn't do it on purpose. It just kind of happened. Or you get the butterflies in your stomach, or sweaty palms. Those would be examples of emotional behaviors that are physiological responses. Get real shaky. I blush. Those blotchy blushes when I experience that and get the adrenaline flowing and get nervous, and I'll get blotchy. That would be a physiological example of emotional behavior. Kind of a subtle physiological response. Emotional behavior is a subconscious reaction to emotional arousal. It's a subconscious reaction to emotional arousal. It just happens. You didn't plan on it. It just happens. Now, it can be very subtle, a physiological response like we talked about, with sweaty palms, shaky hands, butterflies in the stomach, blushing. It can be very subtle. Or it can be very demonstrative, where you slam the door, or you kick the wastebasket, or you slam your fist. Now, you notice some of those examples I gave were the same thing as emotional expression. The difference is I could slam the door. We have a back and forth in the class, and I get angry, and I leave and I slam the door. That behavior, that response could be either emotional expression or emotional behavior. The difference would be, did I slam that door on purpose to let you know how mad I am? Or did it just kind of happen? I wasn't thinking. I just did it and it happened. That would be emotional behavior. Or you kick the garbage can without thinking, or slam your fist without thinking. You've seen or heard of people punching the wall when they get mad and they break their fist or something. They think, oh my gosh, that was stupid. I'm a huge Buffalo Bills fan. Grew up a Buffalo Bills fan. We get NFL Sunday tickets so we can watch. That's my one vice. I save up so we can get the NFL Sunday tickets so we can watch the Buffalo Bills every Sunday. Back when the Bills were playing the Giants in the Super Bowl, before a lot of you were born, Buffalo was supposed to win that game. They were about to win that game. Came down to a field goal. And I had a bunch of my students over at the house watching the Super Bowl. We had kind of a Super Bowl party because I was expecting a big win and a big celebration. And the phrase that sticks in every Buffalo Bill fan's head is wide right. The field goal went wide right, and they lost the Super Bowl to the Giants. I jumped up, and Mitchell, our oldest son, had a big metal Tonka truck, and I kicked the Tonka truck. And actually the Tonka truck went farther than the football did on the field goal. I about broke my toe. Oh my gosh, it hurt.
And you scared your kid.
But I didn't even think about it. It just happened. I just did it. That's emotional behavior. And sometimes emotional behavior can get you in trouble if it's inappropriate. I mean, if you are in the military and your CO yells at you or tells you to do something and you slam your fist, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble. If you're married and your wife tells you to do something and you slam the cabinet door, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble. Emotional behavior, if it's inappropriate, can have a negative response to it. We do it without thinking. It just kind of happens. And it certainly communicates messages. Emotional expression and emotional behavior can be the same actions. It's just one is conscious, you're in control, you choose to do it. The other is subconscious. It just happens. You didn't mean to do it. You didn't. Okay? Know the difference between the two? Understand the difference between the two? Emotional contagion, they talk about in your book, and it's one of the key terms in the vocabulary. Emotional contagion is when you experience emotion, it's catching. That's what it means. When you experience emotion because the people around you are experiencing it. Matt's example a minute ago, funerals happens all the time, where you're doing okay, you're cool, you've got it under control, until you get around the family and they're crying and all emotional, and then you feel it. That's a great example of emotional contagion.
Or did you say the definition once again?
It's when
You experience emotions as catching.
yeah, it's catching. Yeah, you experience the emotion of the people around you. It's shared emotion. Because they're feeling the emotion, you feel it too. You're experiencing the same emotion as the people around you.
Me and my dad went fishing. I was about 16. So the guy got sick, and then went all the way around the boat, came back to the other side.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
It could be, yeah, it could be. If that sickness is a response to emotional behavior. If it's a type of emotional behavior. Got sick because he got so excited or whatever.
Seasick.
Yeah, or that guy that got sick gets so upset and everything, it makes the guy next to him upset, and it makes the guy next to him upset. That would be emotional contagion. Now, it happens with funny movies, too. You can go see a movie with your friends and everything, and you're just busting a gut laughing because they're laughing, you're together, and then you get the DVD and watch it at home, and you don't experience it as sharply as you did with your friends. When you're all together and you share that emotion, that would be emotional contagion. It's catching shared emotions. Okay? And then the other term that they talk about a lot in the chapter is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, I'm trying to draw an arrow here. Emotional intelligence goes back up to emotional expression. How you choose to communicate emotions. Emotional intelligence is how effectively you communicate your emotions. Now, some people, you can't tell, you have no idea what they're feeling, what they're going through. You don't know if they're angry, upset, if they're surprised. You don't know what's going on. They don't communicate their emotions very effectively. Some people, it doesn't matter what the emotional arousal is, they respond the same way. Some people cry when they experience emotional arousal. Some people start giggling and can't stop. Have you ever, it happens fairly often in extremely sad situations like a funeral. Some people will laugh. Have Have you ever experienced that? That would be lack of emotional intelligence, that they're not communicating that emotion. That's probably an example of emotional behavior. They're not in control of it, it's just happening, but they're not communicating their emotions very effectively. So those are emotion terms that we need to have as we go forward with the chapter. That'll help you a lot on the fill in the blank and the matching. On page 252, while I'm thinking about it, some of these come right out of these two lists, big lists that are in the chapter. On page 252, make sure that you get the list, page 252, influences on emotional expression. The 6 influences on emotional expression. They begin on page 252. They're not numbered, but there are 6 influences on emotional expression that you need to know. They begin on page 252. Number 1 is personality. 2 is culture. 3 is gender. 4 I call social expectations. They've got social conventions and rules, which means social expectations. That would be number 4. 5 is fear of self-disclosure. And 6 is emotional contagion. The 6 influences of emotional expression, beginning on page 252. Number 1 is personality. 2 is culture. 3 is gender. 4 is social conventions and roles or social expectations. I'll accept either one. 5 is fear of self-disclosure. And 6 is emotional contagion. So make sure you get that list in your notes. You have that list. Can I erase this? If you got this, it's okay if I erase it. All right. There are 3 theories of emotional arousal that are mentioned in your textbook. I'm going to put them on the board and go through them so you'll have them in your notes real easy to understand and to find when you're taking the test. These are the 3 theories of emotional arousal. 3 ideas as to what happens when we experience emotional arousal. They are the 3 theories of emotional arousal. In other words, these 3 theories attempt to explain or describe what happens when we experience this emotional arousal. What happens to us? How do we react when we experience emotional arousal? The first theory of emotional arousal is called the common sense theory. The common sense theory of emotional arousal helps to explain how we react, how we respond when we experience emotional arousal. The common sense theory says, number 1, and we have to have this first step with all of these theories, in order to have emotional arousal, an event must occur. Remember that, something specific that heightens your emotions. An event occurs. That's step 1 in the common sense theory. All right? Common sense theory says an event occurs. You experience emotion. Something happens, you experience the emotion, and then you respond physiologically. Okay? Common sense theory says that an event occurs, something happens, you experience the emotion and you respond physiologically. So it's a beautiful day. Beautiful day today. You decide you're going to go out hiking in the woods, maybe pick some berries, just enjoy the sunshine, enjoy nature for the day. You're walking down the trail and all of a sudden from behind a tree, a bear jumps out. Claws, teeth, nasty bear. The bear's going to eat you. That's the event. The bear jumping out. According to the common sense theory, once that bear jumps out, you're what? Frightened, probably, scared. So you experience the emotion and then you respond physiologically.
Play dead.
You what? Play dead. Yeah, you drop. You kick the bear. You throw the bucket at him and take off running. You wet your pants. Whatever it is, you respond physiologically. And that's important because we all experience it. We all respond to emotional arousal differently. Especially when we're talking about emotional behavior where we really don't have a lot of control over it. Who knows how we're going to respond when that bear jumps out? So that's what the common sense theory would say. The bear jumps out, going to eat you. You get scared, you throw the bucket and take off running. Make sense? Sound logical and reasonable? Okay, number 2 is called the James Lange theory. The James Lange theory of emotional arousal. James Lange says that the event occurs just like we have to have an event, but now we're going to change things up a little bit. The James Lange theory says the event occurs, you respond physiologically, and then you experience the emotion. We switched around 2 and 3. Stages 2 and 3. So the James Lange theory says you're out walking through the woods and that bear jumps out, gonna eat you. The bear jumps out, you respond physiologically. Bear jumps out, you throw the bucket at him. You kick him. You faint. You take off running. You wet your pants. And then you get scared. That you just react. You have the response, the physiological response, and then you feel the emotion. Does that one make sense?
I think that's more what goes on.
Yeah. All right, let's go to number 3 now. Number 3, this will help you on the test. Number 3 is the only one of these theories that has an extra step added to it. There are 4 steps to the cognitive labeling theory. The cognitive labeling theory of emotional arousal. Got to have an event. We're going to follow the James Lange theory here for a little bit. The event occurs, you respond physiologically, and then here's the added step. What does cognitive mean? When you see the word cognitive, what do you think of?
Like brain skills.
Yeah, brain skill, thought process, thinking. That's cognitive. So we have to have that step in here. An event occurs, you respond physiologically, you process or interpret your response. And then you experience the emotion. An event occurs, you respond physiologically, you interpret, you process that response, and then you feel the emotion. So the cognitive labeling theory, we've got to add that thought process in there. The cognitive labeling theory says the bear jumps out, "Rah! Gonna eat you." You respond physiologically. You throw that bucket of berries at him. You take off down the trail running. That's your physiological response. Your heart's pounding. You're breathing heavy. You're running down that trail, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, that bear almost ate me. I gotta." And then you feel the emotion. You think about, "I almost died. That was terrible." And then you feel the emotion. That's the cognitive labeling theory. That you have to process it. You have to think about it and what just about happened before you experience the emotion. So which one of these makes the most sense? How do you react to emotional arousal? Which one of these best describes the way you respond or react to emotional arousal? Matt, what did you say earlier? James Lang?
I feel like you react before you ever even think.
Okay. Remember our word contextual that we've used so much in this course? These theories are very contextual too, or should be. It should be determined by the situation, by the context that you are in. We typically respond differently based on what that event is, based on what's going on. And you're absolutely right. James Lang will save your life. I mean, we're taught in some situations to respond James Lang. If you're driving in your car, you're out on interstate or whatever, a long trip, and you're driving. Have you ever done one of these coming back from a concert or something, and your head's got a night class, and your head starts bobbing? Have you ever done that? Long day? And your car drifts over just a little bit and hits those ribs. What happens? Yeah. And you whip the wheel back and your heart, you wake up for a little bit, don't you? That's James Lang reaction. You hit the ribs, you hear that, and you quickly bring your car over. You respond. Heaven forbid this ever happens in Somerset, where everyone, expert drivers, do so well with their driving. Someone runs a stop sign in front of you. You slam on the brake and crank the wheel. You have to respond James Lang. Law enforcement, healthcare workers in the ER, first responders, military, they're taught James Lang. You respond, you take care of business. You do what you have to do, and you experience the emotion later. James Lang will save your life. But if you react with James Lang, if you're working with children, if you're working with little kids, and you react James Lang, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble. What do they teach you when you work with kids? Step back, take a breath, count to 10. That's anti-James Lang. That's conditioning you not to respond James Lang. You have to think it through first. When we first moved here, I got home from work and was exhausted in the recliner. Looking back, I was kind of watching Jeopardy, kind of sleeping, napping. And Jared was in preschool, our youngest son. And I'm in the recliner stretched out, and Jared jumps up on my lap, and his knee caught me perfectly. I mean, I doubled over and fell to the floor. And on my way down to the floor, I grabbed Jared by the arm and swatted him on the butt, and then fell to the floor. When I could breathe again, I felt horrible that I reacted that way, tried to find Jared. Couldn't find Jared anywhere. I go into his room. He's sitting on the edge of his bunk bed, and his little lips just quivering. I felt horrible. I reacted James Lang in a situation that was very, very inappropriate. You don't react James Lang in that situation. Each one of these is appropriate. You probably experienced each one of these in different situations. That you're fine initially, but then when you think about it and you process what it means, what this event is going to mean to you, mean to your life or whatever, that's when you get angry. Or that's when you get emotional, you get upset. That's cognitive labeling theory, where you process it and then you experience the emotion. Common sense, the emotion happens initially and then you respond physiologically. You get sad and then you cry. So each one of these is appropriate. You need to, on the test, these are 60 points. There are, I'm trying to think, complete the steps for each one. So that would be 10 points each. And then fill in the blank where I set up a scenario for you.
Yeah,
I describe an event and your reaction. And you have to identify which one of these theories I'm describing. So you should be able to read my description and say, okay, here's the event, and I responded physiologically and then I felt the emotion. Well, that's James Lang. Or here's the event, his description of the event. This is going to be an easy one because it's obviously got 4 steps in it. That's cognitive labeling theory. Cognitive labeling theory is the only one with 4 steps. And then you've got common sense theory left. So you have to be able to read my description and determine whether I'm describing common sense, James Lang, or cognitive labeling. Okay? Depending on what textbook, you might have these again in psychology class or abnormal psych, and sometimes they play with the names a little bit. Instead of cognitive labeling, they'll just put the labeling theory or the cognitive theory. But these are quite common. You see these, you might experience these again in another course, in another class. So that's major points on your Chapter 8 test. That's 60 points. Just on that page. I mean, they might show up again in the matching and the true-false and stuff. So make sure you understand that. Are there any questions about these 3?
Finals open note as well, right?
Oh, no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, handwritten note.
It wasn't written out.
Okay, one of the concepts that we always discuss when we talk about emotion is the concept of the spiritual child. And this comes up when we talk about emotion and we talk about relationships. And what the spiritual child describes is the idea that the relationship that you create with another individual, the relationship you have with a good friend, with someone you're romantically involved with, significant other, that relationship is unique. It's like a spiritual child. The terminology that we use when talking about relationships and the emotions in those created in those relationships, we use the same terminology that we use with children. We nurture the relationship, we adopt the relationship. We use a lot of the same terminology. No relationship, no 2 relationships are identical. Every relationship, just like a child, is unique. And the emotions that they create in that relationship are going to be unique. So what they're talking about in the textbook is that it's very, very difficult to judge one relationship on your relationship or what you think a relationship should be. They're all different. They're like a spiritual child. Yeah, you can't compare. And we do it all the time. It's kind of a natural thing to do. We try to recapture what we experienced in another relationship. We try to create that in a new relationship. Or the new relationship suffers because of bad experiences with the old relationship. And we talk about baggage and letting go of that stuff and moving on. With the spiritual child, the concept of the spiritual child, each relationship is unique, it is new, and different. And the emotions are different as well that are created in that relationship. That relationship is going to stir and generate different emotions. You will feel them differently and express them differently than with another relationship. It's the concept of the spiritual child. Each relationship is unique and is different. Okay, there's another big list in your book that begins on page 258, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to spend a little more time with this list because it's important. So make sure that you get this list, and I'm going to give you a couple of notes that go along with it. It begins on page 258 in your textbook. These are the guidelines for expressing emotions. There are 6 guidelines for expressing emotions. And there's more than a couple test questions that comes from this list. On page 258, the 6 guidelines for expressing emotions. See where I am? Number 1 is recognize your feelings. Recognize your feelings. What I'd like to do with number 1, it says recognize your feelings. Let's put in parentheses after that, recognize your feelings, meaning identify the reasons for your feelings. Recognize your feelings, identify the reasons for your feelings. What has happened? What has taken place? Why are you feeling this way? Identify the reasons for your feelings. Recognize your feelings. What am I feeling? Am I really angry at that instructor, or am I frustrated with myself? What has happened? I didn't prepare for the test. I didn't get ready for the test. So I'm frustrated at myself. Where are these feelings coming from? Well, I'm kind of taking it out on this person because of an old relationship. I'm carrying that baggage. I think it happens a lot too. But if we take the time to identify the reasons for the feelings, where are these feelings actually coming from? What's going on? Why are you going through this? Why am I experiencing this? Might be surprised sometimes. It's an emotional inventory. It's an emotional inventory. Where's it coming from? Why am I feeling this way? Identify the reasons for your feelings. Helps you understand those feelings. And number 2 will help us do that from a language standpoint. Number 2 says, under 6 guidelines for expressing emotions, helping you communicate your emotions, increasing your emotional intelligence. 6 guidelines for expressing emotions. Number 2, choose the best language. Choose the best language. Now that doesn't mean English or Navajo, or English or Swahili or whatever. What they're talking about is that when we are talking about, well, let's start off with real fundamentals. When we're talking about our feelings and emotions, what kind of messages are we using? Content messages or relationship messages?
Relationship.
Yeah, when we talk about our feelings and emotions, we're using relationship messages or relational messages. So think for a minute, are relational messages or relationship messages high abstract or low abstract?
Low.
They would be high abstract, right? Because content information is low abstract. It's very specific. 2 + 2 = 4. Pretty difficult to argue with that. Relationship messages, relational messages, tend to be high abstract. Love means different things to different people. The language that we use when we talk about our feelings and emotions and relationships tends to be high abstract. Will you go out with me? What does that mean? Marriage means different things to different people, obviously. So the language itself that we use when talking about our feelings and emotions tends to be high abstract language. So with number 2, in choosing the appropriate language or choosing the best language, in parentheses, put describe. Describe your feelings. Be as specific as you possibly can. Describe what you're going through. You're trying to communicate your feelings to someone else. By describing our feelings, we're trying to take a high abstract concept and make it as low abstract as we possibly can. It's hard to do. Yeah, it's very difficult to do. But if you describe your feelings and be specific, when you do this, I feel this way because of a relationship I had earlier, or because it tells me that you don't, whatever. You're describing your feelings, and this is what you need to know for the test. By describing our feelings, we're taking high abstract, by describing our feelings, we're taking high abstract relationship messages and making them as low abstract as possible. By describing, and you might want to underline describing, by describing our feelings, we're taking high abstract relationship messages and we are making them as low abstract as possible. By describing our feelings, we're taking high abstract relationship messages and making them as low abstract as possible. That ties in with number 3 on our list of guidelines for expressing feelings. Often, most of the time, feelings are very complex and you're experiencing more than one emotion. It's making you angry, you're hurt, you're upset. 3 is share multiple feelings. Don't just focus on one, share the multiple feelings. Number 3, share multiple feelings. Number 4, recognize the difference between feeling and acting. Recognize the difference between feeling and acting. This is number 4 on page 262. Recognize the difference between feeling and acting. And this is something that I've had to work on. We have a natural hesitancy. We try to avoid the feelings because we're afraid of how we're going to respond. We're afraid of that emotional behavior. So we avoid the emotion. Recognize the difference between feeling and acting. Don't avoid the emotion because you're afraid of how you are going to respond. Remember, we're in control of emotional expression. We can choose how to respond, or if we even really need to respond. Some situations, it's better if we don't respond, right? And we can choose to do that. I do it often when I'm in meetings with my supervisors. We got a leadership team meeting today that I'm missing to be here with you, and I want to thank you all very, very much for that. But often I'll get upset with something my supervisors want me to do. A lot of times it's probably best if I don't let them know how upset I am. Or if I'm very careful in how I make sure that I'm in control of how I choose to express that emotion. I choose to go home and split firewood. Often, don't I? Number 5. This will remind you a little bit of what we talked about yesterday. Number 5, accept responsibility for your feelings. And then in parentheses, number 5, accept responsibility for your feelings. And then in parentheses, put use I messages. Accept responsibility for your feelings. Use I messages. And William remembers what I messages are. They show ownership and responsibility for what you're saying. I messages show ownership and responsibility for what you're saying. Unfortunately, most often, we do just the opposite. The opposite of using I messages is blaming the other person for what you're feeling. Use I messages. Don't blame the other person for what you are feeling. Use I messages. Don't blame the other person for what you are feeling. You make me so angry. No, I don't. That's your choice. You are in control of your feelings, of your emotions, of your attitude. Nobody can take that control away from you.
But the things they do make you feel that way.
They can try to take that away from you. And it's one of those things that's easier said than done, especially if you're talking about a significant other whose actions and behaviors do influence what we're feeling. But we certainly have control over how we are going to respond to that. You've got to take ownership for the feelings. It's not bad that you're feeling this way. Okay, now what do I do? How do I express this? How do I communicate this? How do I deal with this? That's what you are in control of.
When it comes to you hear a lot of marriage counselors or relationship counselors, things like family counselors. They always tell you to use you messages instead of I messages. And I was wondering why that is.
I don't know.
It expresses to the other person, you make me feel this way.
Right. Well, I understand. But then the whole goal is to...
Yeah, I don't understand that. And from a communication context, that's assigning responsibility for what you're feeling to somebody else. And I don't know how beneficial that's going to be in the relationship, because and I don't know what was said, I don't know the context, I'm not saying that your counselor is wrong, but from my perspective, what that does is say, I'm good, it's on you.
So would it be better to say,
It's your responsibility.
when you do this, I feel this?
Exactly. That I feel this way. Now it's shared. Now you both have a responsibility to what's going on in that relationship. But the danger with the you messages is that you assign, you lump all of that to them. I'm good. You made me feel this way. Yeah, it's on you. It's on you. Instead of sharing that responsibility, dealing with it together. Now, if you go back to the last one, describing your feelings, or go back a couple more, you work that hand in hand, using the I messages and taking ownership. Here's what has taken place. Here's how I feel about that. When this and this and this happens, I feel this way. It says to me that you don't care. It says to me that I'm not a priority. It says to me that this is more important than the kids. Whatever it is, you're being specific and you're describing those feelings and you're using those I messages.
In the book, it says I messages can be used too much.
Yes, it can. Yes, they can. They can become self-centered. Remember we talked the other day about being other-oriented and focusing on the other person? You can abuse I messages too, where it becomes all about you and you... I'm trying to think of a good illustration of this, where you use the I messages to manipulate the other person. I'm in control. And you use it negatively. It's like any tool, it can be abused. And iMessages can be abused, where now it's all about you. It becomes very self-centered if it's abused, if it's used to the extreme. In most cases, iMessages are positive and are encouraged, should be used. You don't want to overdo it and use them to manipulate the other person. Get them to do what you want them to do, or send the message that you are in charge and they have no control.
You
don't want to do that at all.
Are encouraged in what?
I'm sorry?
You said iMessages are encouraged in what? Sorry.
Are encouraged and usually appropriate unless they're abused. Encouraged and appropriate unless they're abused. They can be used for control. Individuals that have control issues can use the iMessages to intimidate, to overpower the person psychologically, and that becomes abusive and inappropriate. Number 6. Number 6 is choose the best time and place to express your feelings. On page 262, choose the best time and place to express your feelings. In parentheses, put assess your communication options. Assess your communication options. That's all that means. Number 6, choose the best time and place to express your feelings. Assess your communication options. Okay, we were just talking about this. You experience those emotions. You have these feelings. What is the best way for me to communicate these feelings? Should I